Hi, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well,
So
thanks.
I guess I'll start at the beginning, which is when I was really little. I've always been really super sensitive to spiritual things. And I think that that was kind of the beginning point for my spiritual journey. Um, but I had a lot of health problems in my life, and that was the catalyst for me having this experience. And so I went through 25 years of Lyme's disease, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, you name it. I dealt with a lot of pain and um, brain fog, lots of fatigue, lots of really just a lot of struggle in my life. And on top of that, I had six children. I was running a full-time cleaning company out of my home. So I was on this adrenaline cortisol high for a long, long, long time, trying to just brute force my way through life. I mean, I wanted to live life the way everybody else was living it. And I just thought everybody else was brute forcing their way through their days and their experiences as well. But it got to a point where I said to my husband one night, I feel like every time I wake up in the morning, I'm in more of a deficit than when I went to bed the night before. Like I'm more tired when I get up in the morning, and I feel like I'm going to reach a point where I'm just too tired to even wake up, that I'm just going to not wake up. And that scared him. And it's kind of scared me that I was in that place. It wasn't all bad. I would have highs and lows, like I would have good times and bad times, and in the good times I would push my way through life some more, and in the bad times I would go to bed. But there came a point in time where I really did reach a breaking point. I was on this cortisol high for so long, and I was really pushing myself through a lot of stress, unnecessary stress, homeschooling all my kids. I was running a full-time company out of my home. I had 10 employees. I was involved, really busy in my church community and that culture, and doing a lot of service work there, and running a household. I had six children, and so it was a lot of stress. And at one point, I said, that was when I said to my husband, I am so burnt out. I'm so tired, and I feel like I'm dying. So we put the kids back in school. I sold my cleaning company. We ended up moving out of that church community. So I wasn't serving in that area as much anymore. And I found myself sitting on my sofa, nursing a new baby, just staring out the window, going, I don't know what to do with myself anymore. So I decided, you know what, this is a time for me to really invest in self-care. And so I really honestly put a lot of attention and resources into trying to figure out how to become whole, how to get healthy. And I started changing my diet. I started doing all the things and researching. And I wanted to exercise. I thought that was a good way for me to take good care of my body. But I was not aware at that time that my body was nowhere near ready for exercise. But I got about a month into that regimen of working out. I worked out with a group of women from my church, and they were doing these workouts at the park every single day. So I would plug in and go. But there was one particular day about a month into that I just was not feeling on my A game. I wasn't feeling super great. I was tired. But I thought, you know what? No pain, no gain. I'm going to push through this like I always do. I'm just going to brute force my way through this, and I'm going to get a good workout in. But that was not a good idea. I did not know that my body was screaming at me, and I wasn't listening to my body, basically telling me, you need rest. You need rest. But I pushed through the workout, and about midway through that workout, I started feeling really dizzy and lightheaded, and I just thought, I do not feel good. So I went off from the rest of the group, and I sat on this little park bench, and I just thought, I'm going to get my bearings. I'm going to take a drink of water. But almost immediately, like I collapsed, and I could feel my body shutting down. I could feel my extremities losing vitality. My arms started to curl in towards my body, and they went hard as a rock. My legs stiffened up. So my body's obviously going into shock, trying to preserve the vital organs. And then my vision went. And after my vision went, my breathing started to shut down, and I was panicking a little bit. I remember one of the last thoughts that went through my conscious brain was, I'm going to die here. Because I could feel it. I could feel myself leaving, being sucked right out of the body. I knew that feeling very well because I had spent 25 years of my life dealing with autoimmune. And in those laying in bed moments, I would literally kind of come and go, be sucked out of the body and then back in, and then sucked out and back in. And that feeling was familiar to me. But in that moment, as I was panicking to catch my breath, the panic literally flipped almost within an instant. It flipped from panic over into peace. And all of a sudden, the last thing from my mind was worrying about getting a breath. I just didn't even worry about it anymore. And I could feel myself moving towards that peace. I wanted more of it because I was drinking it in deeply, and it felt so amazing. I felt overwhelming surges of love flowing through my entire being, and I wanted more. And so I started to move in that direction. And as I did, I separated out of my body, and I was still very conscious. So it wasn't like I fainted, because I was still very conscious about everything. Like, I was keenly aware of every minute detail that was going on around me. I could hear women crying and panicking and stressing out and calling 911. I could hear those things and perceive those things, and was very much dialed in to what was going on. And I also remember thinking to myself, why are they acting like that? Because it didn't make any sense. I was not having the same experience that they were. I was in this beautiful, blissful, wonderful place of love, where I just felt like I was being held by the hands of God in this beautiful space. And it was so easy, and it was so effortless, and it was so I don't even know if there's words to describe how amazing and euphoric that experience was. And it didn't last very long. I didn't go to heaven, and I didn't talk to angels at that point in time. But it did open up opportunities for me to do that later on. And we can talk about that. But in this particular moment, I just briefly popped out, got some perspective, and then was told to go back into that physical body that was so riddled with pain and fatigue and fog. And I didn't want to go back into the body, but I did feel like I was supposed to. But as I was separated from the physical body, at some point I could see, and I was aware that I was seeing this with my spiritual eyes and not my physical body, but I could see the whole scene. I could see the ambulance coming from far away. I could see the women freaking out and on their phones. I could see the woman that was cradling my head in her hand, slapping my face, trying to get me to revive. And she was saying things like, "Come on, Janet, you got to breathe, come back." And I remember the thoughts or the feelings in me at that time was, I don't want to. Like, this is way better. It was the first time that I had really been liberated from a physical body that was so broken and so heavy and dense and dark and struggling. I just felt so free and so liberated and so awake and so aware, and so present, all the things. But while I was in that state of awareness, there were three things that I felt came to me in that moment that I will never forget. And the first thing that came to me, the realization, was I am not that physical body. I remember looking back at that physical body, and as I looked over the scene, it's a weird feeling to see the familiarity of your physical body and think, oh, wow, I thought that was me. I'm looking at this body, but as I'm looking at it, it just seems like it's this inanimate, lifeless bag of earth and water that obviously the elements of the earth have intelligence to them, but not consciousness. I was that consciousness that was animating that body, and now I was not animating the body. And so that was the first realization that I think I made in that moment, was I am not the physical body. In fact, how I see the body now is, when you wake up in the morning and you put on clothing, you put on an outfit that represents how you feel for the day, or your personality, or what you're going to go out and experience for the day. That outfit represents our physical bodies, but it is not the sum total of who you are. So when you're clothed in a mortal body made of material, that material is just an activity that's happening with earth and water. that is being animated by your consciousness, but it's not who you really are. And I think, that was a big epiphany for me because I was so invested in the persona of Janet. I was so invested in the persona of my hair and my body and my makeup and how I look and how I move about in the world. But I didn't realize that that isn't me. So I was investing a lot more time into that persona than was healthy, I think. And so that was the first epiphany that came to me, is I'm not that body. The second epiphany that I think came to me was death isn't real. Death is a doorway. Death is a corridor into another experience, another dimension, another place, another awareness, I guess. And what I learned in that moment was we don't cease to exist just because we lay down a physical mortal body. And that was such a huge comfort to me because I've lost loved ones. I'm sure you've lost loved ones, Peggy, and we often think that death is this finality of the existence of someone. And what I discovered in my personal experience was that I wasn't final. I didn't cease to exist. I was very much aware of everything that was going on around me, even though I looked dead, right? And my lips were blue and they couldn't get a pulse and they called 911 to come and revive my lifeless body. So I know that for a time, whether I was dead or not, I know that I hovered in the threshold between this 3D dense world and the spirit world. I know that I hovered somewhere in that corridor, right? But what I learned through experience in there is that there are aspects of us, there are parts of us that are deep within this physical body that are animating this body that are infinite and eternal and never ending. And so the beauty of that was the realization that nothing can harm this persona, this part of me that is infinite and eternal. I can't run out of time. I can't really die because I just proved that. Even though the body's not doing anything, I'm still here. I'm still very conscious. In fact, I was more aware, more clear, more conscious than I've ever been in my mortal life before. And that was a beautiful and amazing epiphany to have because I learned from that moment that I get to build an identity for myself based on that and not based on just the cloak that I'm wearing in the physical body, in the physical form, if that makes sense. So if we're building an identity for ourselves based on just the physical body, you're going to have a lot of suffering because that physical body isn't necessarily infinite in the way that your spirit self is or your soul is. And so when you can learn how to tap into your soul and create the identity from that place, you can't run out of time. You cannot die. No one can take anything from you because you are everything. And you can't lose anything because, again, you are everything. So when you start to identify yourself with that part of yourself, that infinite part, nothing can threaten you. Nothing can threaten the divine I am. There's no threat to the infinite. What could possibly threaten infinity? Nothing. And so that was a game changer and a life changer for me, that one epiphany. So that was epiphany number 2. The first one was I'm not the body. The second one was I am a divine I am presence and divine essence that is eternal. The third epiphany that I had was when I had that brief glimpse or that brief moment of looking at the inanimate physical body laying on the ground, I thought to myself, if that's not me, who is this? Who am I? What am I? And when I asked that question, I stepped into the oneness. And I'll explain what I mean by that. But I stepped into this realization that my essence, my energy, my light, whatever you want to call it, my soul, my presence, my essence, my spirit, it pushed out in every direction. Like the minute that I asked, who am I? My aura pushed out and I became everything. It was almost like, where does my light end and God's light begin? It doesn't. It's like asking, where does the air in the kitchen end and the air in the living room begin? They're integral, they're integrated. And when I stepped into the oneness, I realized and recognized that I am one with every blade of grass. My consciousness, my presence, my essence, my energy is one with every mountaintop, every ocean floor, every grain of sand, and every star in the sky. I literally, in that moment, my I am, my identity, became one with everything in the universe. I literally became the container of the universe. And now that realization, that is an exercise that I take all of my students through on a regular basis to help them to tap into their oneness. Because guess what? The number one question I get asked from people when I share my story is, I want to be special. I want to have a near-death out-of-body experience. I want to travel the cosmos and talk to angels and speak with God and have these amazing cosmic epiphanies. Well, guess what? You can. And you don't have to die to do it. You just have to become aware. You have to use tools to become aware that you are already one with all of those things. And you can have that conscious awareness experience of being one with everything within the container of the universe. And why is that important? I think it's important because of something that a recent client once said to me. When I take them through these experiences as a quantum healer, as I take people through these meditative experiences where they get to go within and tap into their higher divine I am within, usually I'll ask them questions like, who do you get to be now? And most people will say, I get to be me. Like without all the filters, without all the personas, without all the expectations, without all the social programming and all of that stuff. I get to be me, true and pure and authentic. Well, this man didn't say that. He said, I get to be everyone. I get to be everything. And I loved that because that was the essence of the experience that I was having in that brief moment where I popped out of the body, recognized who I really am, stepped into the oneness and was one with everything and everyone. And when you can have that perspective with you on a long-term basis and live your life from that perspective, you start treating other humans very differently when you recognize that they are you and that you are them. You start treating blades of grass and trees and nature and the air and the water and the fish and the animals and the birds. You start treating everything in your conscious space very differently when it is you, when it's one with you. And so those were the three major epiphanies that I feel like I got from just separating out of the body for a brief moment. So, and that was also a catalyst for driving me deeper into the study of quantum healing. So I hired a mentor, a coach, to help me discover how to access that oneness, access that inner part of myself again and again and again. And the interesting thing about it is that you don't have to pop out of the body to get there. You can get there by going deep into your body. And so that's what I do for a living, is I teach people how to access the uncharted waters of who they really are for healing, for spiritual awakening, for personal transformation, and to really find out who they really are on a deeper level, on a spiritual level. So I teach classes in spiritual sovereignty and also quantum healing. Yeah, that's my story.
What does that mean?
Oh, my gosh. So if you go to my YouTube channel, we've been talking about spiritual sovereignty and autonomy all year this year. And what that means is recognizing that you are a divine soul. You are a divine I am, and you don't need anything outside of you to make you feel whole. It's self-aware, self-governed, and self-fulfilled. And it is from that place, that spiritually sovereign place, meaning no one gets to control you, no one gets to own you, no one gets to tell you who you are. You just be. You just tap into the beingness of who you've always been. That's sovereign, right? And no other human, no other idol or anything outside of you in the physical mortal realm can complete you and make you feel whole. That's sovereignty, spiritual sovereignty. So I help people tap into that for growth and for awakening. You know, the whole point, the whole purpose why God is giving these near-death, out-of-body experiences to people is to help wake us up, to help crack us open. And so it's not about dying, it's about opening and expanding our consciousness. That's what it's about. And so, yes, you can have an NDE or a heightened spiritual experience every day, just by learning the tools for how to tap in to you.
So what happened when you came back?
What happened when I came back was I went through the dark night of the soul because I had to reinsert myself back into a physical body that was still hurting and that was still not very healthy. And but the beauty of that was that then became the catalyst for me to want to explore those feelings again, that expanded consciousness again and again and again. And I had been following some people online already at that point because I was looking for answers. And so I hired my first mentor who taught me the quantum healing tools and techniques. And I said to my mentor, I said, Joshua, this is exactly what you're taking me through, and what you're teaching me is exactly what I experienced when I stepped away from the body, when I had my NDEs. And he said, that's because you're accessing the deepest levels of your being. That's where you are when you're in the body and you're animating the body. You're not outside of the body, you're inside of the body. But the beauty of having an NDE is it helps to turn off the distraction of you thinking that you are this body. It helps to take you out of here, out of your brain, out of the ego, out of the persona that you've been conditioned to believe that you are. And with none of that to distract you anymore, you literally do stare at yourself and become deeply aware of your beingness. So I didn't realize this at the time, but when I was in the thick of pushing my way through stress and chaos in my life, what I was doing was identifying with my persona. And I think that I literally did believe that maybe if I do enough, someday I can be enough. Someday I can matter. I was looking for validation because I didn't have any self-love. Maybe not any, but I didn't have much self-love. So if you don't have self-love or self-awareness, you're going to identify with the ego, with the persona, with the conditioning of the world, and you're going to live a life that's full of chaos and adrenaline and cortisol. And that's what I did.